This video is brought to you by Squarespace. What's up, everybody? Well, the 97th Academy Awards, also known as the Oscars, took place just a couple of days ago this past weekend. A lot of us horror fans were very excited because we had two pretty significant movies get nominations. We had Nosferatu that had a number of them. We had The Substance that had a number of them. And unfortunately, by the end of the show, Nosferatu walked away with 0 wins, and The Substance walked away with, I believe, only 1 win for hair and makeup. Not the Best Actress nomination that we were all extremely excited about for Demi Moore. So not only was this a topic that was already kind of on my brain, but it's one that was actually suggested and voted on by my patrons. So this is going to be February's Patreon pick. If you don't know what that is, Patreon is my crowdfunding source. You can get all the information down below in the link. It's where I offer additional perks for those of you that want to give additional financial support to this channel. And one of the perks that I offer is every single month, I let my patrons throw out a bunch of different ideas. I pick a set of my favorites and they vote on them, and then I produce that video. So this month it's going to be talking about a collection of horror films that should have won an Oscar. And it's an interesting topic because, I've never really dove into it too much, but some movies I'm going to be talking about, you will be shocked that it not only did not win an Oscar, but some of these weren't even nominated for any Oscars. So it goes without saying, look, when you're a horror fan, it's just like being a rock or a metal fan. You kind of expect to be the outcast. You expect to not be sitting at the cool kids table. It's par for the course. We're used to it. We bitch every single year, but for the most part, we're used to it. But I don't know, something about this year twisted the knife a little bit more, that we actually got some significant recognition and yet still walked away with nothing. It feels like we're still not quite at that point where the horror genre is respected at the same level as all the other genres that are continuously nominated every single year. So will that ever change? Who knows? These movies live on in our hearts and live on in our fandom regardless, but let's dive into some of these. It's not going to be like a ranking on which one is most deserving, just a collection of movies. And we're going to kick off with one that, to me, I was actually surprised to find out did not win anything, although I probably shouldn't be surprised at this point. And that's David Fincher's Seven. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there's some people out there that say that's not a horror film. Whatever. I consider it a horror film, just like I consider Silence of the Lambs a horror film. So if you don't agree, just skip to the next one, I guess. But Seven, to me, absolutely a horror flick, and it was nominated. It was nominated for Best Film Editing, but it lost out to Apollo 13. Now, I have not seen Apollo 13 in well over 25 plus years, so I can't really speak to any recent memory on how much better or worse the editing is in Apollo 13, but I have a hard time believing it's more impressive than what they pulled off in Seven. Now, something that the movie absolutely should have been nominated for that is a shame is that it was obviously not a pick for Best Picture. Why? I don't know. Best Director, especially for, they did Alien 3, but that was technically, most people consider this his first film with David Fincher. I think he absolutely deserved a nod for that. And if nothing else, Best Original Screenplay. The screenplay for Seven is incredible. Now, I don't think it would have won. That year, the screenplay award actually went to The Usual Suspects, which it's kind of hard to argue that as the winner, and I don't know if I would be bold enough to say that Seven is better than that. I enjoy the movie more, but I think it should have at least been nominated. So that was one that was a pretty big one that was a surprise to me. It did get a nomination, but it lost. Seven deserved quite a bit more. Another example that is a more recent one that really gets brought up every single year at this point because it's one of the most absolute egregious omissions, and that is Hereditary, specifically Toni Collette's performance for Best Actress. There's no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse. Look, I like Hereditary. It's not what I would say one of my favorite horror films of all time, but that performance is one of the greatest that has ever existed in the horror genre. All thoughts on the movie aside. And the fact that it wasn't even nominated, I remember that year when the nominations came out, and I don't think there's ever been a louder outcry in the horror community for a snub or an omission for the Academy Awards. Toni Collette has been nominated a number of times. I mean, I think she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for The Sixth Sense, which is another great performance, but pales in comparison into the insanity that she puts herself through in Hereditary. So that one, of course, everybody was expecting to be on this list, but yeah, you got to mention it because that was like a giant what the fuck. It's just one of those occurrences where you could just look the Academy straight in the eye that year and say, okay, tell me 5 or 6 performances this year that are wildly better than this one where this was not even included. Please explain. Whether you're a content creator, a business owner, or just somebody who wants to express their creativity to the world, having your own website is absolutely crucial. But when it comes to actually building your own website, even somebody like me who has extensive computer knowledge, I wouldn't even know where to start. Well, Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs and creatives to stand out and succeed online. Squarespace's new design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful personalized website tailored to their unique needs. With their Blueprint AI, you can answer a few questions about your brand and have a fully custom template to interact with and fine-tune to your liking. They even allow you to easily sell access to content like blogs, online courses, or videos. And by using Squarespace Payments, you can manage your payments all in one place and give your customers all their favorite ways to pay, such as Klarna, Apple Pay, and even ACH direct deposit. So if you're ready to kickstart your online presence, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Cody Leach to save 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain using code Cody Leach. And thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. This is another one that I absolutely hate the fact that it got no recognition because it was one of my all-time favorite movies that year. It's a movie that I have rewatched continuously. Of the last decade, this is one of the movies that's easily going to work its way into my rewatch list the most, and that is The Menu. Now, The Menu is one of those movies that I'm a little bit softer on the argument of it not being a horror film. I think that a lot of people consider it a horror comedy. I think at the time I didn't even include it in my horror list that year because to me it was more like a dark comedy than a horror comedy. But nonetheless, enough people consider it a horror film that I wanted to include it. And regardless of the genre, it should have been nominated for fucking something, if nothing else, screenplay, because that movie is brilliant with its commentary and the way that it just takes certain things down and with how good the comedy is and how good all of that lands with all the different characters. There's outstanding performances in it too. I mean, I don't think that Ralph Fiennes' performance probably stacks up against a number of the ones that he has been nominated, and I think one for one in the past, but he's the star of that movie, and the performance he gives in that is better than a number of performances that I've seen nominated in the past for Best Actor, so whatever. But if nothing else, Best Original Screenplay, that should have been a shoo-in for The Menu because it was brilliant. Here's one I don't see get brought up very often, but to me, very clearly deserving, and that is James McAvoy's performance in Split. Now, Split in and of itself, I don't think is an awards-worthy movie. I enjoy it quite a bit, but it's definitely got issues. You know, I have plenty of things about that movie that bug me while enjoying it very much. But his performance, that's one of the best things that he's ever done, if not the best performance that he's ever done, between that and Glass. So that's another one where, you know, I don't know what actors were nominated that year, but I guarantee when you look at the list, there's at least going to be one of them where you're like, I don't know. I think James McAvoy playing multiple characters, being comedic and scary in equal amounts throughout an entire film, I think that's a little more deserving of praise. Another one I would throw on there is It, either Chapter 1 or Chapter 2, as far as production design. Now, It, the original, the first film, excuse me, is a significantly better movie than It Chapter 2. I'm not really a fan of Chapter 2 at all, but it's still got amazing production value. I mean, you look at just pictures online of the underwater wells and everything that they had to build. It's like an entire indoor set that they built from the ground up, filled it with water and grime and slime and all that. You go to the first film, I mean, you have a number of those sets as well. You have the old creepy house that's put up that they have in the middle of the film, Pennywise's lair with the stacks of all the stuff and the kids floating around. It's incredible production design, especially for a horror film. Like, it made a lot of money, but up to that point, it was kind of like a big surprise monstrous hit. That was not something that you were obviously going to bank on being one of the highest grossing films of all time in the genre. So production design was just next to none in both of those films. Speaking of Toni Collette with Hereditary, another one that I think we were just numb at this point because of Toni Collette's admission that we didn't make as much of an outcry for, but Mia Goth in Pearl. Why? Why was that not? I mean, you look at the one-shot sequence where she's talking to, I think it was her cousin, and going through all these different emotions in one take. Or you can even just show as a sizzle reel just the end of the movie where she's sitting there doing that creepy smile and she's like sad and trying to be happy while the credits are rolling. That could have been her little Academy Award sizzle reel right there. I mean, her work is incredible throughout that entire trilogy. I'm higher on Maxine than most people, but I love all three of them. But Pearl, as far as something that is awards worthy, that performance in that film, I mean, that's the best work that Mia Goth has ever done. It's some of the best work I've ever seen in the genre. So that's another one. Where the fuck's it at? Here's one that actually frustrated me a little bit. And I look back and realized that A Quiet Place was not only nominated for sound editing, but it lost. What did it lose to? Bohemian Rhapsody. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm much more forgiving on it than most people. That's one of those movies like Anora seems to be getting the treatment of now, where a lot of people really like it, and then as soon as it wins Oscars, everybody fucking hates it. And it's like the worst nominee ever. And so I'm not a part of that camp. I really enjoy that movie. It's definitely a sanitized version of the story, but I have a lot of fun with it. And yes, you have Queen music and you have the concert and you have, Live Aid and all that stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of really good work that went into the sound editing. And of course, the sound in that movie is incredible because you're listening to Queen almost the entire damn time. But it's not as impressive as a movie like A Quiet Place, where literally the sound editing is the entire film. There is almost no dialogue in that movie. So the entire experience, a lot of the story, everything that you're going to get out of that film is through the sound editing. And it's a really great movie. I love A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2. So really either of those could be on this list as an omission for sound editing, because to me, that's the perfect example of how you will take sound editing and prop it up above everything else. And if that is not the deserved winner, what the hell is? Now let's back it up and do a few classics, shall we? Give some of the newer films a break for a bit. And there's probably going to be a few people that are going to accuse me of having bias or being a fanboy for having this inclusion, but hear me out. A Nightmare on Elm Street should have at least been nominated for Best Visual Effects. There's a ton of horror movies out there that, even if they're not the type of films that the Academy tends to recognize and acknowledge, Best Visual Effects should be a category that horror owns more times than not. Hell, I could make a solid argument that this fucking dude right here deserves a nomination for either The Last Film or Terrifier 2 for Best Visual Effects. I mean, that stuff is incredible. But A Nightmare on Elm Street, let's go back to 1984 and let's really unpack what Wes Craven and his crew were able to pull off with this film that, to this day, I will say, alongside Dream Warriors, is some of the best horror effects that don't get talked about enough. Whether you're talking about the rotating room for the two different sequences in that movie, Tina's death as well as Glenn's little blood tornado, that blood tornado in and of itself as a visual is pretty incredible. You have even that whole sequence where Freddy first kind of shows himself and he's stretching his arms out and he's peeling his face off and he's cutting his fingers off. I mean, there are so many things. Hell, even the fucking tongue coming out of the phone. I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. Like, there's so many things in A Nightmare on Elm Street that are absolutely iconic visual effects. The fact that they didn't even get a nomination, I think, is ridiculous. No, come on now. Get the fuck out of here. And if that doesn't piss me off enough, this is probably the biggest one. This might be the one that I'm most passionate about on this list. The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. Many of you know, my favorite horror film of all time. Not nominated for anything. Not really a secret nowadays. This movie was lambasted by critics, and it was an absolute financial flop when it first came out, which is just a crime against humanity. But regardless, there have been financial flops that have been nominated for Oscars in the past. I mean, Shawshank Redemption was kind of one of them. That film didn't really find its footing until it hit home video. And that's one of the greatest movies of all time. It was nominated for plenty of things. But The Thing not being at least nominated for Best Visual Effects is enough to make you want to slap the shit out of somebody. The fact that it wasn't an easy runaway win that year is enough to make you want to back up and slap the shit out of him even harder. Because that is literally the Bible for visual effects, especially in the horror genre. That is the movie that is most often referenced as the greatest visual effects, practical effects of all time, and the one that inspired so many different artists, and the one they go back to, like, that's literally the Bible for that entire industry. And it wasn't even nominated. Woosah! All right, let's move on to the next one. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Now, it did get a couple of nominations. It got 4 of them, actually. Didn't win any. That's pretty surprising, especially with Psycho being one of those films that kind of transcends the genre and is often mentioned alongside all these other prestigious films as like one of the best movies ever made. You know, that's back before horror got a little dirty in the 70s and the 80s and suddenly was like taboo to be acknowledged. But Psycho not winning anything, if nothing else, for direction for Alfred Hitchcock, that was pretty surprising to me. Now, here's one that was one of the last times that a horror movie came out and actually did really well at the Oscars as far as nominations. You got The Sixth Sense back in 1999, which seems like a fucking eternity at this point, so maybe that's a point in and of itself of how long it's been. But you had 6 nominations for this film. Now, it didn't win any of them, but the one that I think it deserved to win the most of the ones it was nominated for is Original Screenplay, and it lost out to American Beauty. American Beauty is one of those movies, like, I've seen it. I saw it as a kid. Of course, I didn't get it. I watched it as an adult, actually, like maybe even a year ago, and I can appreciate it. It's definitely not a film I would ever desire to watch again, and it's totally an Oscar movie, which a lot of those movies I would say that too. But I don't think the screenplay of American Beauty can hold a candle to The Sixth Sense. I just can't. I'm not saying it's bad. It's a good screenplay. It's got good performances. There's interesting things going on. But The Sixth Sense, a movie that is absolutely like this pop culture icon. It's the example that we use when we talk about surprising twist endings. Like, it's up there with The Empire Strikes Back as the immediate examples that everybody, even normies that watch 2 movies a year, will throw out as the example. That's kind of the shame of the Oscars a lot of times. Like, these are the awards that are the most prestigious of that year that we're trying to award, saying, you are the best at this during this past year of film. And there's just no foresight with a lot of those awards. Not that that's, you know, something that's easy to have, but there's a lot of movies that don't get awarded or that miss out on a nomination or that lose a nomination to something else that ends up being the movie that society and the film-going community, both behind the camera as well as in the theater as the viewers, celebrate and hold up as the classic much more than the one that won. And I think this is one of those examples. You know, American Beauty's beloved. It's not as beloved as The Sixth Sense. Now, here's one that might actually surprise you because it's an older film that is widely regarded alongside Psycho as one of the greatest movies of all time by the majority of the film-going community and the filmmaking community, that not only did not get any Oscar nominations, but is actually more famous for getting a Razzie nomination. And that is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. The Shining didn't get a single Oscar nomination, but it did get a Razzie nomination for Shelley Duvall's performance that they actually retracted years and years later after a lot of the details came out about how she endured just absolute hell from Stanley Kubrick to get that performance. But look, her performance may not have been appreciated as much at the time and has gone on to be appreciated much more, especially in lieu of those details coming out. But The Shining not getting any nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, or acting, even if you don't want to give Shelley Duvall the nod for whatever fucking reason back then. Jack Nicholson, that's a weird one that nobody acknowledged. He was already like a prestige actor at that time, and that's one of his most celebrated and iconic performances of all time. So The Shining not having any nominations, that's a weird one for me. And rounding out our talk about classic horror films, we have Ridley Scott's Alien. Now, it did win Best Visual Effects, and so it was nominated for that as well as Best Art Direction. I don't know the film that won Best Art Direction, so I can't really speak about whether it deserved to win over Alien or not, but it at least won one. It won Best Visual Effects. But a movie like Alien, that is easily one of the most influential films of all time. It's one of those movies that has become the blueprint for so much of horror and sci-fi, that it wasn't nominated for anything else like Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, any of those things, is wild to me. And that's one of the things that bugs me the most about when horror films do get some kind of nomination or nod the few times that we get them at the Oscars, is it's never one of those films that just gets nominated for everything that it deserves to be nominated for. I mean, you have Amelia Perez that had 13 fucking nominations, most of which, if not all 13, maybe aside from Zoe Saldana's performance, everybody was like, what the fuck? That's one of the worst examples of that thing this year. How is it nominated for that? You don't have any examples almost, with the exception of a few like The Sixth Sense and maybe Silence of the Lambs or something like that, that actually gets nominated for Best Visual Effects and an acting performance and direction and cinematography and Best Picture. And it just always feels like a giant glaring omission. If it's good enough to make the Oscars, that horror film is fucking outstanding because it has to go over so many more hurdles to get considered than any other genre. And if it's good enough to be nominated for one thing, you can almost take it to the bank. It's good enough to be nominated for many others. And on that note, we have the two most recent examples that absolutely belong on this list, and that is Nosferatu and The Substance from this most recent Academy Awards. Now, Nosferatu is a film that definitely was not for everybody. I'm actually surprised that it was for me, because on paper, that's a film that typically would not really be my thing. But I really enjoyed Nosferatu after the second watch especially, and I look forward to checking it out again sometime down the line. But the one category that it was nominated for that it not winning to me was pretty egregious is cinematography. Now, I have not been able to check out The Brutalist yet, which is the one that won, and I have heard from pretty much everybody that has seen The Brutalist that the cinematography is fantastic in that. So, gonna be going a little bit on an ignorant limb here, but the cinematography in Nosferatu was some of the best that I've ever seen. Like, that's a film that is like visually intoxicating, where there are so many different frames of that movie that is like an art piece in and of itself. So many visuals in that movie that to this day still stick with me, where I'm like, man, that was like one of the coolest fucking things I've seen in a long time. Like, everybody, myself included, loves the visuals and like the dreamlike quality of it and the way that they make it somewhat black and white, but not really, and use a lot of natural lighting, and like the visual of Nicholas Hoult as he's going to Count Orlok's castle, and you have the horse and the carriage come at him, and it's just very surreal and nightmare quality. You have visuals like when they're on the boat, again, going to Count Orlok's castle. There are plenty of visuals in that movie. The hand, the shadow going over the town, that's my favorite visual of the entire year. To me, that was a runaway victory. And the fact that it didn't win and wasn't nominated for a whole lot else is just very odd to me. Like, even Lily Rose Depp not being nominated for Best Actress or Supporting Actress, I don't know what category they would stick her in. Probably Best Supporting Actress, because they wouldn't want them going against Demi Moore. But that was just a weird one to me. Another one where it felt like they kind of threw us a bone and then we're like, okay, you got nominated, now shut up. And then you got the big one that has set the internet on fire over the last couple of days, and that is The Substance. And the thing that was amazing to see with The Substance is not only that it had a really nice award season run where it won a lot of awards. I had the pleasure of being at the Critics' Choice Awards and watching not only Coralie win for Best Original Screenplay, but also seeing Demi win for Best Actress, but I believe Demi won a majority of the awards for Best Actress throughout the season up until the Oscars. But it was nominated for quite a bit. Best Screenplay, Best Direction, Best Actress, Best Picture. So it is one of those examples of what I was just talking about, where it's like, goddamn, give it its flowers. If it's good enough for this, it's probably good enough for these other things. And that was one of the few times that we've actually seen a horror film actually do that. But it walked away with only Best Hair and Makeup. I honestly think it was a better screenplay than Anora, and I'm a big fan of Anora, but there's just way more going on in The Substance, so I think it should have won for original screenplay. Directing is a little bit tougher because that was a really, you got the Brutalist again. I have not seen. A Complete Unknown, I've always heard mixed things about it, so that kind of felt like a weird one to me. Sean Baker and Coralie, though, those are two that are pretty neck and neck. So either one of those winning for direction, I would not have really made too much of a stink out of. Best Picture, I didn't think it had a chance in hell, but that would have been really cool, especially since it didn't win a number of awards. Sometimes they'll give it Best Picture. It's like, sorry you didn't win the other ones, but you're going to get the big one. But I was happy that Anora won Best Picture. But Best Actress, that's the one that, of course, everybody has been talking about, the big point of contention. And this is another one, like Best Directing, that was tough for me. Like, for the most part, it felt like a 50-50 race. For me, it was like 51-49 in favor of Demi. So I could not be upset at all that Mikey won, because I thought she did a phenomenal job. I absolutely thought that it was awards worthy and win worthy. But damn, it would have been great just for the story for Demi Moore to win that. For what she has gone through in her career, and she's been a mainstay as a movie star since the 80s. Like, everybody knows who Demi Moore is. And at one point, she was like the highest paid actress back when like G.I. Jane and all that came out in the 90s. And she's always been relevant. She has always consistently had work and showed up in things. One of my favorite roles she's ever been in is Mr. Brooks from the 2000s. She's a badass in that. So absolute movie star that has never really gotten the recognition of anything like awards worthy until now. And the entire theme of The Substance, the entire point of that movie, it would have been a really great poetic moment for her to win for that, because that entire film is about aging actresses not really getting their flowers and being discarded by the industry for somebody new and up and coming. And ironically, that's kind of how the Oscar win went, even though I can't get mad enough to really harp on that, because I think Mikey Madison was incredible. But I wish Demi Moore would have got the win. I think that she deserved the win. I think that would have been the better turnout. No hate at all for Mikey Madison. And she's going to go on and do amazing things. Everybody in the industry is going to be wanting to work with her now. She's going to be getting roles and turning away roles left and right. I don't know how many more Demi Moore is going to get that's going to get this type of recognition. You know, I think it's very fair to say that Mikey Madison has a chance to get nominated for many more Oscars in her career, and Demi Moore probably doesn't. And that's not a reflection on her career or where she's at as an actress or saying that she can't still give us something that's awards worthy. I just don't know if she's going to get that opportunity or not. And so that sucks that she could have gotten finally the recognition that I think she deserves. And instead it went to the very young up and coming actress in one of her first big major roles. So Demi Moore as The Substance for Elizabeth Sparkle, that's going to be one that, you know, alongside Toni Collette, that us in the horror community are going to be talking about for quite a while. At least she was nominated. At least the Substance got a lot of recognition, and she got a lot of wins before we got to the Academy Awards that hopefully takes away some of the sting that I'm sure she felt, even though she wouldn't say it. So that's the one that I wanted to end on, because that's the one that everybody has been talking about that actually sparked this topic, I'm sure, even for my patrons. So Demi Moore for The Substance is the last one that I definitely think should have been the winner. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with what I have said here as far as these movies that should have been nominated or been the winners? Do you have some other examples on here that are egregious that I totally missed? Please let me know down below. I'm sure there's many more. And let me know what you thought about the Demi Moore, Mikey Madison thing. Do you think that Mikey deserved it over Demi? Do you think that it was absolutely should have been Demi? Do you think it was too close to call and either one was going to be a happy, upset situation? Let me know all your thoughts down below, and we'll talk about it. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. And I'm also going to put my review of The Substance up here for you to check out. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.